Hi there, I'm Jim Zirin. Welcome back for more conversations. Matthew Barzun is with us. Matt Barzun started life as a New Yorker. He's now a Kentuckian. He has been an entrepreneur with great success. He's been a political apparatchik conducting a grassroots campaign for President Obama. He has been a United States ambassador to Sweden and to the Court of St. James, that's London. And he's now written a tremendously interesting new book, The Power of Giving Away Power, in which he discusses new strategies for success. We are pleased to welcome Matt Barzun to the program. Matt, welcome and congratulations on your book. It's really fabulous. I really couldn't put it down. It's so interesting because new material emerges from every page. So thank you for being with us, and thank you for this book, which is a tremendous contribution to the public record.
Well, thank you for those kind words, and it's great to virtually be together. Thanks for having me. Now,
you entitle your book, The Power of Giving Away Power. You can have power giving away power. I mean, could you please explain what the title means?
It is, we went back and forth on the title, and it's strange for me that, that I used the word power twice in the title, because it's a word when I was in my internet.com career at the beginning of my career, and then when I did presidential politics and when I served as a diplomat, it was a word I went out of my way to avoid using because I think it is so often loaded. I mean, there are positive aspects, sure, but it comes, I think, bundled for many of us with a lot of negative connotations. So I was hesitant to use it, but then I was persuaded, I think we all, in some respects, have a problem with power. And so we need to talk about it. I mean, look around. And so, yes, I think that lording power over others, obviously we've seen how disempowering that can be. And yet if we just sort of hoard it to ourselves, that leads to alienation and loneliness. And this following phrase is very much in vogue right now, but I think it's also not the right thing, which is power sharing, which sounds better than hoarding and lording. But power sharing sort of implies that there's only so much of it to be divvied up. And with the leaders I talk about in this book, who they all had a different way of thinking about power, and they thought it wasn't something that was a scarce resource that could, like something you mine like coal. It was something you could make, and you could make it with other people, and it was infinite. And so I think things like power sharing lead to things of divvying it up and dividing. Power making is about multiplying.
You started your professional career after college with a .com. Of course, with the .com, there is a premium on innovation. So do you feel that you have kind of an innovative approach to things, or was that natural, or did it evolve over time?
Certainly evolved over time. I remember, this is back in the early days of 1993, when I started working for CNET as the fourth employee, and they let me pick my own title. And I said, well, that's kind of weird. I don't know what it is, but we had lots to do. And so they suggested innovator. And it was kind of a joke, I think, for them, our co-founders. And so I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, I've never been in the corporate world. He's like, oh, no, make it director of innovation. That sounds more important. So I was director of innovation, and that involved me making coffee, running the copier machine, leasing the Pitney Bowes printing stamp machine. So very sort of mundane stuff, writing mission statements, kind of anything and everything that needed to be done. But so I guess, finding new ways to do that.
Most Americans think that life is all about winning and losing, and Americans like to win.
Yeah.
I think the reaction to our withdrawal from Afghanistan was very much a feeling that somehow or other we'd lost and we should have won. Is life about winning and losing, or do you have another formula for success?
Well, I think it's an important question. There are certainly areas of our lives, collectively and individually, that do lend themselves to winning and losing. I think and the book really is about this, we tend to kind of overdo it. And one way you can test this yourself is if you ask 10 people, what's the opposite of winning? They all say losing. And then you say, okay, more interesting question. What's the opposite of winning and losing? And 9 out of 10 of us say some version of the following. I don't know, sitting it out, not playing, right? So 9 out of 10 say not playing. 1 out of 10 of us says playing or laughing or learning or loving or any of those other things we do in life that you don't win or lose.
But your life has been an incredible success story. I mean, you are a winner. You had success in the dot-com world, even riding it out after the crash. You had success as a political organizer. Matthew, you had success as a diplomat, which was a new career for you. And it's a story of innovation, a story of success. How can you say that life is not about winning?
Well, I guess it would be the distinction between the word success and winning, which are different, related, I agree. Success, too, is kind of a loaded one. But yes, in all three of those areas, I certainly had that wonderful feeling of achieving something and making something. And what they all had in common was I didn't do it by myself. And I don't mean that in the sense of I was, raised by loving parents and communities and friends. I mean all that too. But I mean the actual act of making websites at CNET in the early days was making things with other people, sitting around a table, not knowing what the right answer was, but trying to figure it out together.
Well, you refer to a pyramidal structure of leadership. You just did, and then, of course, in your book, you also referred to constellations, groups of people who undoubtedly have more power than individuals if they're working together. And I had a sergeant in the Army used to say, individuals don't win wars, armies do. Now, your metaphor for that comes from the Great Seal of the United States. Here we are. We're in the back of the dollar bill. We see the Great Seal of the United States. And on the right, interestingly, we have the obverse with the eagle, and the eagle is looking toward the olive branch, not toward the quiver of arrows. And above the eagle, you have an array of stars, a constellation. And then on the left, you have the reverse, which is a pyramid. Eye at the top of the pyramid, which I assume is meant to be the eye of God. The motto, Annuit Coeptus, Providence has favored our undertakings. And then below that, a motto, the New Order of the Ages. And you argue that in our corporate life and even our political life, we're hierarchical. We think of a leader at the top of the pyramid, an individual, lots of people striving to become the leader who's best paid and has the greatest status. And but much more power is derived from constellations of people. So maybe you can elaborate on what the dichotomy is.
Sure, yeah, and thank you for bringing up the visual aid of the dollar bill and our Great Seal. And we won't get into this too much with our limited time, but it took longer to design that logo than it did to win the war. So it took a long time. And one of the things that right above the eagle's head, you read those two Latin phrases from the back that sort of nobody knows. I mean, those don't come off the tongue. But the most famous motto we have is right on the front of that, which is E pluribus unum, from many, one. And that is written right underneath the constellation. So that is the way. How can you be at once many and one? Now, they could have chosen, and this is where I think the distinction is important. They could have said, well, from many bricks, one pyramid. I mean, that is an image. And Aristotle famously said, the soul never thinks without an image. So we have these images in our mind. And I think too often it's that pyramid one, up, down, in, out, rank, rate, sort, sift. We're really good at that, and appropriately. But when we think that is the only kind of stability and the only kind of order, and by the way, the people who came up with this logo, they put that at the back. It symbolized for them strength and durability. But for the front, they chose that constellation, as you said. And originally, it was 13 different size stars, asymmetrically organized. On the dollar bill, it's kind of regimented, but with beams of light going out behind it. And this was for them. You could be an individual, as a person, as a state, that sort of worked at any scale. You could stand out as yourself, an individual, and be part of something much larger, more useful, more powerful than you could alone. And obviously we tragically and hypocritically fell short of that ideal then, and we still do. But I think it's the best idea America's ever had. And what I mean by that is any band of revolutionaries can declare independence. And on July 4th, 1776, that's what happened. 13 separate colonies, each free from England, or so they said. How to figure out how to actually work together, how to be interdependent is the technical word. That's the hard part. Enshrined it in the Constitution. And that, to me, how you can be separate and one, is really important. And to close on that, it was George Washington who, when he became the first president elected under the Constitution, got to name 5 Navy frigates. And he wasn't fanciful. I mean, he didn't go for biblical references or classical references. He named them the USS United States, the USS President, the USS Congress, the USS Constitution, right? These are tangible, practical things for this new country. And you guessed it, USS Constellation.
Well, of course, we're living through a period of immense political polarization with deep divisions in the country.
Yeah.
Is it our essential problem that we have failed to find constellations again?
It is. I think we've gotten into some bad habits. It's not only in politics, but it's pretty obvious in politics. And here's, it's sort of hard to imagine we're talking now, Republicans and Democrats in Washington sitting down and having a productive constellation kind of meeting together where you make something together. That is not impossible. It's just hard to imagine. But if you just take it one level, let's say just the Democrats or just the Republicans, it shouldn't be so hard, but it is. And in DC, you know it well, the interagency process could be one of collaboration and co-creation. But so often it's people from state feeling distrustful of people from Treasury and vice versa. And then within, let's say, the State Department, you get that same set of, if I'm winning, you're losing, or vice versa. And so that same pattern of behavior just permeates at every level of the organization. And that's a shame, because we can, if we adopt this constellation mindset, which would begin, by the way, what if more meetings in Washington or in your workplace began, and leaders of any type can be a huge help here, if they just started with these 5 or 6 words. I don't know, maybe we might, ... Because the truth of the matter is most, and whether it's how to withdraw from Afghanistan or what to do about the next wave of COVID regulations in schools, you name it, any issue we're dealing with, we can pretend we have the right answer, but we don't know. What if we could figure it out together as a small group of people?
It's interesting that in terms of the approach to all this, it's been the Republicans who've been more pyramidal. Certainly in the modern era, Herbert Hoover had his rugged individualism, and Teddy Roosevelt was the man in the arena, while the Democrats have been more grassroots, constellation oriented. There are no red states or blue states. They're only the United States. Do you think there's some reason for that?
That's a good one, Jim. I have not. I mean, it was FDR who, coming after Hoover, who looked around at consolidated, let's call it the pyramid power of big business in the devastation of the Depression, at the depths of the Depression, and said, we are going to meet consolidated business power with consolidated government power. So tellingly, when the Treasury folks gave him the dollar bill, the first time to ever show the back of the US seal, I think we all would have, they put the front of the seal first and the back of the seal second. And he said, no, flip it, put the pyramid first. So I think he really liked that sort of consolidated power. He felt it was necessary in an emergency. He may very well have been right. So we had the emergency of the Depression, the emergency of World War II, the emergency of the Cold War. We've been kind of stuck in that emergency pyramid mode, and there is a time and place for it. But I think it's time to go back to putting the constellation first. And I think both parties, without getting too into that, I mean, my politics are kind of clear, but I think those habits of behavior sitting around a table in Washington, that's not Democrat or Republican. It's a bunch of bad habits we've learned about either trying to win the meeting, we're just acquiescing, letting someone else meet, and we're not doing the hard work of co-creating and building something together, which starts with that humility. I don't know, maybe we might, and then do that hard work.
But the wellspring of American society has been competition, and competition drives capitalism. Competition creates our status in the world. Americans love competition, or we have laws on the books that say we should promote competition.
It's a huge.
Is there something wrong with competition?
No. And I think one of the stories in the book that I think is really, certainly I learned a lot from this story, is, to your point about capitalism, the largest commercial organization in the history of the world is a constellation, and it's Visa. And if you go back to the story, D. Hock, when he founded it, he's a mid-level manager at a mid-tier bank in a mid-sized city. And he entered the credit card market where it was forced competition between basically East Coast Bank, what's now Citigroup, and Bank of America on the West Coast. It was a total debacle. 4-week delays in people getting paid, tens of millions of dollars in arrears. It was a nightmare. And he and a small group of people went and sat in a windowless conference room in Sausalito, California, and imagined a new system. And they said, I don't know, what if we? And they imagined a system, Jim, that was absolutely competition, but also key areas of cooperation. And the problem with the pyramid mindset, so they designed this constellation, which is $13 trillion of transactions a year. I mean, it's amazing. And small banks and big banks, Bank of America gave up power to this new system. And it wasn't any more powerful than the tiny little bank that D. Hock worked at. Now, in the old world of a pyramid, you had affiliates, and they did what Bank of America told them to do: force cooperation within a pyramid, and then force competition between the pyramids. That led to a debacle. And so I think the key in America, again, at its best, and we fall short, is this healthy mix of competition and cooperation. And that the pyramid forces too much competition, and just as bad, it forces too much cooperation, which can be really detrimental and disempowering.
Okay, so let's talk about your considerable role in the Obama campaign. How did this idea of yours to embrace grassroots support for Obama as opposed to a pyramidal type structure, how did that figure in the campaign?
I had worked on John Kerry's presidential campaign before and learned for the first time how political fundraising worked. And when I did it in the Obama campaign, I thought, okay, the standard thing is $1,000 a plate dinner, which 99% of people in Louisville couldn't afford. And so we wondered out loud, hey, what if you asked everyone and just asked them to invest $20 early on in the process, not late online, which had existed before, but no, really early. And if you got people excited early on, they could get other people excited and get other people to give $20. And so that's what we ended up doing, sort of low dollar fundraisers. And we did the high dollar ones too. It was a both and situation. But what it did was it got away from this pyramid. And one of the, typical fundraisers from both parties, and this is true of nonprofits who do fundraising capital campaigns, they usually start with a pyramid, right? And they write one really rich person on top and then 4 semi-rich people. And then they finally get to the bottom. And then they, it's grassroots or it's friends of the library. And it's always kind of an afterthought, and it's always kind of lame because it looks nothing like what they did to get the gajillionaire to give. And so in a constellation mindset, you don't do that at all. You just think everyone here is capable of giving something. How do you make a compelling offering so they want to plug into you? And if they do, they will give unbelievable amounts of time and energy if you treat them like the star they are in a constellation and get them to connect to other stars. It's much better math.
Okay, so with your efforts, Obama wins, McCain loses, Obama becomes president, and he appoints you ambassador to Sweden. Now, how did you take these innovative ideas to your role as ambassador to Sweden?
Well, I loved my time in Sweden. And one of the things I learned early on was we had, for a bunch of good reasons, the embassy bombings in 1999, we had fortified all our embassies. This is before 9/11 even, and certainly 9/11 made us fortify them even more. And which is true of so many fences, you build them to keep people out, but what they end up doing is keeping you in. And so we would just get sort of this mentality, a bunker mentality living in an embassy. So I wanted to get us out. So we did the US Embassy Roadshow, and it was hokey, and it was sort of deliberately hokey. We got an Airstream trailer and a Chevy pickup truck, and we drove it to cities that aren't the capital city. And I'm speaking to you from Louisville, and cities like Louisville in America or like Louisville overseas, just, they aren't the government capital, the finance capital, the cultural capital. And so they don't get the attention, but interesting ideas are spread evenly around these countries, I think, around these cities. Just attention isn't. So we wanted to go give attention to smaller cities, and we'd set up a little mini embassy in a box, let people come in, ask questions about visas, and just sort of be open door. We'd roll out a red carpet and just sort of be the best of open America that we could be.
Okay, now England, you present your credentials to the Queen. You're there in London. How did you carry out these principles in England?
So in England, I was tempted to try to replicate this roadshow idea. And then it just struck me, it's like, that's not going to work with the British public, I don't think. It sort of worked for a while in Sweden. So the folks at Pew Charitable Trust, they do amazing research, and they came out with a big global study right when I arrived in London. And it asked citizens in 40 countries what they think of the United States. Do you like us? Neutral, don't like what we're up to. In 39 of the 40 countries, young people under age 25, had a higher opinion of America than their parents and grandparents. One country, which was the UK, young people had a less favorable opinion of America. So I thought, okay, well, here's an opportunity. And what should we do to try to increase the trust, respect, and understanding that young people in the UK have for our country? And I knew the one thing I didn't want to do, which is give them a lecture on foreign policy from the US ambassador. I mean, I have 3 teenagers in my house. I knew that wouldn't be a win, but I did want to engage. And so we ended up doing these seminars. We'd have 100 basically high school seniors at a time. And we would give them a blank, index card and an embassy pencil. And we'd say, please draw a picture of something that frustrates or concerns you about the United States. So they'd all write down a different thing. And then I'd call on people and they would say what frustrates them. We'd write it up on the whiteboard and we'd talk about it. And at the very end, we'd say, flip over the card, please, and write one word or one picture of something that inspires you about America. And we don't have time to get into it, but I have 20,000. I ended up going to 200 schools. So I did that workshop with 20,000 British young men and women. We made a word cloud of all the pictures we got combined into one. Number one fear and frustration and confusion was guns, followed by police brutality and racism. And on the positive side, there wasn't a clear one like guns, but it was opportunity, diversity, freedom, and food.
Did you perceive from this a deterioration of the so-called special relationship that Churchill had visualized between the United States and Great Britain?
Well, in a way, I saw the opposite and I love that you raised that, because that phrase, special relationship, I was told by a British friend in New York before I got there. He's like, please don't be one of those people that bangs on about the special relationship. It's a cliche, it's dead. It's not true. And so I respected him. I think he's was wrong. And when Churchill coined that phrase in 1946, he's doing it. He's out of official power right after the war. He's in Missouri with Truman. It's known as the Iron Curtain speech because he uses that phrase, which was such a powerful phrase, to represent what Stalin and consolidated power rolling across Europe looked like. And what I think is so interesting is, he's trying to rally the West, as we called it. What should we do in the face of consolidated authoritarian power? Should we create consolidated authoritarian power of our own, which is a legitimate option? And he said, no, we should form millions of special relationships. So yes, the official one between sort of 10 Downing and 1600 Pennsylvania, but in his vision, it was between farmers and mothers and fathers and millions of them.
Constellations of special
Constellations
relationships.
of them. And so the title of his speech was not The Iron Curtain. It was Sinews of Peace.
But I have a question for you, Matthew Barzun. And my question is, does giving away power work?
Yes, it created the largest commercial organization in the history of the world. It created the largest knowledge transfer engine in the history of the world. That's Wikipedia. It created the most reliable network the world has ever known in the internet. It created the world's #1 recovery platform, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I could go on. All these amazing innovations and organizations started, they embraced uncertainty, and they set in motion a pattern and tone of thinking of all the power that exists in each of us and how we could make it together.
Matthew Barzun, the power of giving away power. Thank you so much for coming by, and thank you for coming by. Tune in next week for more conversations. I'm Jim Zirin. Take care, be well, stay safe, and all the best.